The monster trio are back in action, and it is finally time to free Loki and have both sun gods head up to the sun world to bring about a double dawn to the ever-darkening Elbaf. Although the very first character that we see in this chapter is actually Kashi of all people, who is one of the two giants who was guarding any Slubby. And he is a bit of a heartbreaking character to have pleading with his captains to break free of this madness. Because remember, this dude was willing to give 100 years of his life, about a third of a giant's expected lifespan, just to secure the freedom of Dory and Brogy. Remembering that the world government had told Oimo and Kashi that they had captured Dory and Brogy, which was a lie, but it still gets me because Kashi was willing to pay such a high price for the freedom of his captains, and now they've just been enslaved. And Oda could have used any giant at all to deliver this dialogue, but he gave it to Kashi, and that hurt so much more. It was a very good little micro decision. And I have to say, I'm quite conflicted with Mr. Dory and Mr. Brogy at the moment, because the part of me that reads One Piece for the spectacle really loves what's happening here. They both look insanely cool and intimidating as demons, and I really want to see them go and smash some stuff, but also it does hurt me on the inside to see them abandoning the core principles of their culture. It's those principles that initially enamored us to the giants all of the way back in the Little Garden, where for one thing, pride and honor were concepts prioritized over everything. Strength without honor was not true strength, and if you did attain strength without honor, then that was nothing to be proud about. And so seeing our boys abandon all of that for just a little power boost, it feels wrong. I don't like it, especially with the idea that after gaining all of this strength, the first thing they're gonna do is use it on a withered old man, and that they are more than happy to do it. With the giants, gaining strength is meant to be for fighting stronger foes, not weaker foes. There is no honor in battle against a weaker foe. And that is exactly what Imu wants later on in this chapter. Imu states that the plan is to shatter the spirit of Elbaf, to crush the heart of its culture, and I really like that sort of ambition from an antagonist. It's the sort of thing that really gripped me with Archie of all people, because sure, he was never a physical threat, but what he represented was so much worse. Archie was a slow-acting poison gradually decaying the spirit of Wano, and that arc was about overcoming the relentless assault on that spirit. And so what's exciting about Imu is that we've got all of the best qualities of Archie, which is not that many, but with Imu we've got none of the garbage. And in the space of a chapter and a bit, Imu has constructed a threat to the very soul of Elbaf, and that level of threat took Archie over 20 years to build. But Imu's just gone and done it by taking out a board game to play. And this chapter does appear to confirm that Domi Reversi is indeed a game played by the rules of Reversi or Othello. So my joke last week about Elbaf turning into one big board game actually kinda seems to be coming true. But this is good, very good, because board games have rules. And so with said rules, we should be able to flip our giants back. And someone recently commented on one of my videos that if we need 2 white pieces to start flipping the black giants back, then we do have Luffy and Bonnie who can both access their Nika forms. So if we can plonk an affected giant between the two of them, I wonder if we could even start to create an army of Nika giants. Demonic Dory says a couple of interesting things before we move on though. The first is that he rather boldly claims that they no longer have a need for gods anymore, and I can't help but feel that Imu might eventually have a little something to say about that. Our giants are probably a little bit too high on their hit of demon powers right now, but realistically, one way or another, gods control their fate from here on out, either through the self-proclaimed god that is Imu or the destined sun god that is Luffy. But either way, Imu's powers continue to be absolutely fascinating. At this point, what can't Imu do? Imu can teleport, Imu can regenerate, Imu can transform, Imu can make demons, and you know what? Imu can probably also make lemons. In fact, it would appear that the only power that Imu does not possess is to conjure award-winning flavor, and that is why you need the sponsor of today's video, Fume. Fume is one of these things that is beyond satisfying to fidget with, and that is only a secondary function. Fume is a no smoke, no vapor, no nicotine, no battery, no significant damage to your wallet, and a non-toxic, brilliant burst of natural flavored air for your oral pleasures, very much akin to herbal teas, that are also specifically designed to break your bad habits. And unlike the One Piece power system, this is not all about raw willpower, as Fume gives you a strong ally in the battle against bad habits by giving you something else to reach out for instead. And very excitingly, Fume have launched a brand new summer flavor, being this here delicious mango, to give you a bold tropical experience like taking a relaxing vacation to an island full of women obsessed with mushrooms. You know the kind I mean. Don't pretend you don't. but it is a very specific flavor. You must try it. And over 500,000 people have already made the switch to Fume as part of their habit-changing journey. So if you're ready to try it for yourself, then now is the time. And for a limited time, if you order the Journey Pack using my promo code GrandLineReview, you will get a free Fume topper, a very awesome accessory to level up your experience. Just head to tryfume.com/GrandLineReview or scan the QR code on screen to get yours today. And thank you so much to Fume, because it's their sponsorship that allows us to bring you the best fictional pirate content possible as often as possible. Definitely give it a go. For now, it's back to you, me. Something that might get overlooked in this chapter is that Dory also says that it's time to call forth a new era of war. And this is actually a reference to something that we were told in chapter 1137, when it was said that King Harold ripped out his horns because ancient giants reminded him of the era of war. And part of that scene was this mental image of a demonic giant that looks a lot like what we're having to deal with right now, just without the wings. But also something that I initially did not notice about that panel is that the ancient giant appears to be standing over what looks to be a fairly advanced city. And in that same chapter, Shamrock states that the quote, vicious warriors of Elbaf actually conquered the New World long ago, which I believe is referring to the era of war, where the giants just set out and took the entirety of the New World for themselves. So what Dory is saying in this chapter is that, yes, it is time for something world domination. And I really want Oda to dive into this a lot more, but there is a small section where we see Usopp's reaction to Dory and Broggy having been transformed, and he is completely distraught and even tearing up at what the two people he admires most in the world have become. And having said everything I did about Luffy and Bonnie potentially being the rules of the game to flip the giants, I do wonder if this might even actually be a job for Usopp, because he is rather traditionally the man who makes the alliances with giants on behalf of the Straw Hats. Usopp admires the giants so much that he's always able to speak their language and earn their respect. He's the one who got Oimo and Kashi on side, and he also got Haruden to praise him as a god. So we could be in for a rather touching moment where Usopp is able to break through to Dory and Broggy even briefly with the profound spirit of Elbaf that has all but been erased in these demonic forms. And the more and more giants that get converted into demons, the one person on this island who most embodies the true spirit of Elbaf may end up being Usopp, and it may be up to him to rescue this spirit. And I really hope that Oda has something planned in that general direction, because there has never been a better opportunity to display the inner strength and spirit of Usopp than right here and right now, with the giants being forced to abandon everything that he admired about them. Although not all giants, because Bent's mother is also living up to that spirit in this chapter, having survived Imu's burst of Conqueror's Haki, and she is vowing to come and save her son. As is Ripley, she's now on the way to Colin, so we could also be seeing Elbaf's most terrifying hidden power rather soon, an army of mothers and housewives. But rather crazily, this chapter also grants us our first glimpse at human Saint Gillingham. I guess more accurately, this is his hybrid form. He's a centaur now, and I know that this is extremely unlikely to happen, but given his newfound centaurosity, I think that this is now a very appropriate time to see a post-time skip Frankie Centaur. Yes, take Killingham on with that. But this reveal has completely changed my impression of St. Killingham. It's like we're not even seeing the same character anymore. Before, I wasn't sure if Killingham was really living up to what it was to have the title of a saint and take on the qualities of a world noble, because in his, I guess we'll call it full beast mode, he seemed to be such a lovely, derpy, kind of good guy who was just caught up with a bad crowd and being used for bad things. Which firstly, I had assumed that that was his hybrid form, but that being the full beast form makes a lot more sense because the Kirin, it is a very kind creature. It's said that a Kirin takes great care never to tread on living things and even manages to walk on blades of grass without trampling them. So in the full beast mode, St. Killingham does appear to be this quite likable and rather gentle guy despite doing all of the things it is that he's doing. But mate, his actual body could not be more different. He has instantly flipped into a sadistic bloodthirsty, and if it wasn't for the more literal demons currently on Elbaf, I would also be tempted to describe Killingham as a demon as well. Having the sharp teeth definitely doesn't help with that impression. And you know, usually in this situation, I would start suspecting as to whether or not Killingham is a fishman or part fishman. Oftentimes, these spiky teeth do lead us to very underwater origins, like we had with Dellinger, Jack, and Sasaki, who were all at least part fishmen, but I just can't see the world nobles incorporating incorporating anyone, even part fishermen, into their society. The prejudice, it is just so strong. Killingham does look a lot like Madame Charlie, I would say, and there is a close-up panel of Killingham that may add to this idea. I think this is an illusion, but if you look at his neck on the right of the close-up, there are some lines that do look like they could potentially be gills, but that is the wonderful illusion of black and white. It's more likely that these are the fabric lines of his neck ruff, which is more obviously seen in the full body image. But I have also seen some others already point out that Killingham looks a bit similar to the female Holy Knight that we saw in Kuma's flashback during the God Valley incident, which I do agree with from the one image we have of her in the manga. That could be Killingham's mother or otherwise close relative. Due to the rather inbred nature of the world nobles, there's always a good case to be made that anyone is related to anyone. But also with Garling and Shamrock, it does appear that being a Holy Knight is something that may run in the family, and I do wonder if the 19 families that chose to settle on Marijois have each offered members to serve the Holy Knights. Although we actually recently saw this woman in the anime, and her color scheme has gone a bit wild. From having very clearly dark hair in the manga, the anime has gone and made her crazy blonde. Garling level of blonde, which is to me the one hair color a character can't have if their hair was originally drawn as pitch black by the author. Although the anime have been making a lot of crazy choices with colors lately. I'm not a big fan of Garling's outfit either. The hair, however, well, that has given us quite the gift, as he shall now be known as Figurland Bananaling. But with Killingham, it is pretty insane just how immediately he became more threatening than Saint Summers. And he does have that vibe of, overconfident youth about him. So I don't think he should be all that difficult to defeat on his own. He seems too confident. And especially if we are getting Loki involved, which it looks like we finally are as we get an update on what's happening in the underworld. And this event has given us something that I was afraid we might never get, which is a legitimately good reason to free Loki. Throughout this whole arc, I have been ever so skeptical about how Oda was going to get him out of those chains, and I've never really been completely satisfied by Luffy's assertion that, nah mate, this Loki is a pretty decent guy, and if not, I'm gonna kick him in the nuts and it'll all be good. It just seemed like a real good way to turn the entirety of Elbaf against us, and to have Loki go on to cause destruction that might have been prevented by just not being an idiot, and in which case, Luffy's now directly responsible for that destruction. I mean, I do trust Luffy's intuition, but I'm also very glad that we now have a much more amazing reason to let him loose. Kind of like when the citizens of Fishman Island were begging for Luffy to come and save them, even though they thought that salvation came in the form of destroying the entire island. I think it is definitely much better to let Loki loose, even knowing that Ragnarok could result from it, rather than leave everything in the hands of Imu. And Scopogaban actually plays a very important part in all of this. The burst of Haki, yes, it is rather fierce, but without seeing the injured Scopogaban, I'm not sure if Luffy or Harudin would have taken this situation seriously enough to consider freeing Loki. But with the very allegedly second strongest member of the Pirate King's crew taken out of action, and him not being able to actually say how he was taken out of action, there is definitely a much stronger case to be made for freeing Loki. I also do have to love the absolute pettiness of Scopogaban to insist that he was the second strongest member of Roger's crew, after being accused of probably third. It's very Zoro and Sanji coded, which means that Rayleigh and Gaban very likely had that same rivalry together, and that is something that I would love to see in a future flashback. I feel like Oda has been very, very guarded about showing anything to do with Scopogaban, even in flashbacks that he's involved in, and that's probably because he didn't want to give away anything about the character. But now that we know exactly who this guy is, I need to see some early adventures of the more dysfunctional Roger pirates. I also love that Loki is the only one smiling after feeling Imu's throbbing haki. Harudin, he's shitting himself, he's completely out of his depth and he knows it. But even Luffy, he's sweating here and he's all like, alright, I understand, this is a bad situation, guys. And so the only one in this group currently acting like the sun god it is that he claims to be is Loki. He's the guy bringing the laughter and the joy to this situation. And I know that's probably because Loki sees this as his ticket to freedom, but it is still very interesting to see someone thematically challenge Luffy's series status like this. Because remember, what's coming up won't just be a struggle against Imu. This is going to be about deciding who gets to take on the role of the sun god. Not that Luffy cares at all about any of that, but Loki does, and we as readers know that it's important. As does Oda. He knows that it's important. In fact, he's the one telling us and consistently drawing all of these comparisons. Like the very short flashback in chapter 1136, where Oda drew Loki in the trademark Luffy Gear 5th pose and also made his silhouette particularly cartoonish. So I am really looking forward to seeing more of Loki's take on Nika, but also his devil fruit. I honestly keep forgetting that Loki even has devil fruit. We just never address it. But that may be part of Loki's confidence here as well, because we do have a logistical issue to solve, which is that the new giant warrior pirates came down to the underworld on their ship, the Great Eric, but they came crashing down because the island clouds that the Great Eric uses to sail apparently disappear in the underworld. So they can't get back up using that ship. They need another option. I don't know how many of those there are, so maybe Loki's legendary devil fruit is going to be the only solution that makes that work. But also some tragedy, because in this chapter we have another appearance, or I guess appearance is the wrong word, but Mossa pops back up into the story. And if you only read the Viz translation, then I'm referring to Shaggy, aka Loki's only friend who frequently speaks with him on the snail phone. And Mossa is essentially calling to say that yes, this is the end of their very strange phone snail-based relationship, which means that Mossa is very potentially Jarl. That's always been the most reasonable answer right from the beginning, because whilst Mossa is translated as Shaggy in English, it's based on the Mossa Mossa onomatopoeia, which means to be hairy, or even more specifically, to be thickly bearded. We have to say that nobody does a beard thicker than Jarl, and also Mossa speaking through the Denden Mushi even looks like Jarl. And so I guess the logic from here is that Jarl is calling Loki knowing that he's about to die and just wanting to say goodbye, as Dory and Broggy have been Domi reversied and ordered to cut off Jarl's head and quote, hold it aloft, and Jarl, being the great warrior he is, has refused to run from battle combat. However, there is a pretty big however here. This chapter is very interesting because it actually goes back in time, and the conversation between Loki and Mossa actually happens before Dory and Broggy are ordered to kill Jarl, because we see that burst of Conqueror's Haki that Imu used at the beginning of the last chapter. So at this point in the timeline, Jarl doesn't necessarily know that he's being targeted, so you could argue that there's no reason to call up Loki and say goodbye. And also the conversation that happens itself is just a bit weird. It's all very ambiguous and it'll make sense in retrospect. But Loki thinks something about, oh, some nasty business coming up in a certain place. There are definitely other theories for this, but I think that Jarl is still currently the most likely candidate, and maybe he could just feel when Imu appeared and didn't need to hear that his death was ordered to know that he would be leaving this world today. But again, Mossa being Jarl has always made the most sense. Might not be true, might be. But again, Mossa being Jarl also has the fact that it's only Loki and Jarl who know the truth about what happened to Harold. So they have this little secret between each other. So of course they're playing their sneaky little phone games. But also something very cool and rather subtle in this chapter is that it looks like Luffy's gotten an upgrade, or he's starting the process to get an upgrade. As when Chopper Gaban fall from the Sun World, Luffy instinctually knows that it's Chopper and some other dude, which no one else picks up on. In fact, they don't even realize that living things fell at all. They just hear a noise. And no one questions why Luffy seems to know so much, but something is definitely being unlocked here. Like how towards the end of pre-time skip One Piece, Luffy started using increasingly powerful bursts of Conqueror's Haki unintentionally. And whilst this supernatural sense of perception does seem to fit into the realm of observation Haki, I would be much more excited if this was Luffy starting to ramp up his voice of all things ability. That would explain why no one else even came close to perceiving this, because Zoro and Sanji are both pretty phenomenal observation users, but they do not have the special voice powers. And if the seed is being planted here, then this may turn into an integral ability in the ensuing fight against Imu. For example, let's say something like Luffy meeting Imu, coming face to face with the god of the planet, but instead of addressing Imu, Luffy is hearing the voice of Gunko yelling out to be saved. Now that is a realm that we could potentially be diving into, but you let me know what you think about all of the madness of this chapter in the comments below. And thank you so much again to Fume for sponsoring this video. Definitely check them out through the link in the description.